Arkansas basketball talk today. Anthony Kristensen in studio with us. I want to tell you our podcast brought to you by Eggland's Best. When it comes to your game day, you want the best in your lineup. That includes your eggs. Eggland's Best delivers more of the nutrition you need with 6 times more vitamin D and 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. You can score now with Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs. Visit egglandsbest.com for more information. Also brought to you by Bentonville Glass. They've been serving their community since 1971. They're committed, professional, and versatile. If you're looking for a quality leader in Northwest Arkansas or looking for skilled craftsmanship, look no further than Bentonville Glass for all your glass market needs with the highest quality products. You can come by and see them now at 507 South Main in Bentonville or online at bentonvilleglass.com. Appreciate you being with us wherever you are. Maybe you're on our YouTube channel. We post our podcasts every day to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We're on our social media channels on Facebook and Twitter as well. Just search Whole Hog Sports. We ask you subscribe wherever you find our podcast. It is the NBA Draft Combine Week. Razorbacks have 4 players. I almost said former players, but it's not necessarily former players.
No, not necessarily. We got 2 who might be coming back.
That's right. I mean, Darius Acuff is certainly gone. Trevon Brazile's obviously gone. He's out of eligibility. But you got these 2 players, Billy Richmond and Meleek Thomas, at the Combine, Anthony. When you look at maybe where they stand in terms of coming back, just kind of give us a rundown of what's the calendar, the deadlines look like, and then what have you seen from them at the Combine? What are you reading and hearing in terms of where they are in these mock drafts that might give you an indication either way what they might do?
Yes, I mean, the withdrawal deadline to return to school is May 27th. So 2 weeks from today, that's when, everybody needs to have their decisions finalized and, ready to go. And, as with regard to mock drafts, I think most of the time when you're looking at those, you're going to see Meleek Thomas kind of in the mid to late 20s or early 30s. So, early or late first round or late first round, early second round. Mm-hmm. And then with Billy Richmond, I haven't seen him in any first round projections to this point, but I did see him kind of creep up into, mid, early 30s. So he's getting closer to that. So that's kind of where those 2 kind of stand at the moment in the projections that I've seen. And then you've obviously got Darius Acuff, who's going to be a lottery pick. He just kind of matter of when he goes. Is he going to get into that top 5? Is he going to go top 10? He's kind of in that range. I think most of the time you're seeing him projected 6 through 10. Mm-hmm. More 6 through 9, I think, is probably where I've seen him projected the most. And then with Trevon Brazile, a guy of his age, being kind of out of eligibility and all of that, I've seen him projected mostly in the 50s, kind of mid to late second round. But it looks like he's going to be a guy who gets drafted kind of no matter what. So that's kind of where things stand. The guys with eligibility remaining have about 2 weeks, or not about 2 weeks, have exactly 2 weeks to make their decisions. And I guess the third day of the Combine's about to get started here with the first day of scrimmages. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
Is there still the gap between when the players have to declare that they're going back to college and when they actually have to declare for the draft? Like, I remember when Isaiah Joe was at Arkansas, there was this gap where he had said he was coming back to Arkansas, but then there were still, I don't know, a number of days, 2 weeks, maybe something like that, where he still had an opportunity to get back into the draft. Mm-hmm. Do you know if that still exists?
I think it kind of does. I mean, you look at just the guys who are in the draft right now, like Flory Badunga. He's committed to play at Louisville next year, transferring from Kansas, and he's still going through the draft process. You've got John Blackwell. Going through the process. As a Wisconsin player, but he's committed to play at Duke next year. So I mean, you still have guys who are doing that. Just kind of seeing kind of where I guess they stand. So I guess that's kind of the most similar thing that we've got right now. But yeah, so you can be kind of locked in on going back to school like those guys appear to be, unless something drastic changes, and still kind of go through the draft combine process and all that.
And what happened with Isaiah was, I mean, that doesn't happen very often. But,
yeah.
But it does illustrate or underscore the fact that
anything can happen.
Exactly. you can say you're going to do one thing and you end up doing another. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, when Isaiah did that, it was like, whoa, we don't see this happen a lot. I feel like you see it happen a lot
Oh, yeah.
across college sports
Mhm.
right now. Malik Thomas, will he come back? Will he not? I'm I guess I've always kind of been of the opinion, and this is with no, quote unquote insider knowledge. This is just based on what I see from him and what I typically see from freshmen who are really good, that he can go pro.
Mhm.
You talked about he's potentially going to be a first round pick this year. That would be very difficult, I would think, to turn down that opportunity, even if the potential was there to come back and improve the draft stock next year.
Mhm.
There's no guarantee that happens. Like I've seen a lot
Yeah.
of players who they're really good one year, and it doesn't matter if it's just basketball. It could be baseball, football, whatever the sport. They can be really good as freshmen, and then coaches in that league, they figure out, like, they're thinking the whole summer of, hey, what did we do wrong against them last year,
Mhm.
and how do we attack them differently this year? And I think that happens a lot.
Mhm.
And you see that quote unquote sophomore slump quite a bit. You can turn your ankle, and so like there's a lot of things that could, in theory, yes, you could come back and improve your draft stock, but you could also come back and you could worsen it too.
Mhm.
So I say all that though because I wanted to ask about Billy Richmond and talk about Billy Richmond, because in the combine, I feel like this is Billy Richmond's time to shine. I mean, like I can't imagine the scouts getting him and not coming away impressed with all of the things he can do. Like I was looking yesterday at some of these metrics that he had in testing. 41.5-inch vertical jump, 32.5 inches where he wasn't allowed to take a step first.
Mhm.
6'8" wingspan. I mean, it's everything that I think you want in a basketball player. And I
Mhm.
don't think any of that surprises us. When you watch him and you watch the hustle and you watch the effort that he plays with, and boy, I feel like if Arkansas can get him, like that is the player. If you get Malik Thomas back, that's great. That is
Mhm.
a huge boon to your basketball team. But I think Richmond is maybe the more realistic guy that you can
Mhm.
get back, and that's the one that I'm really interested to see. How does this week move the needle on him in terms of where was he projected before the combine began? And then what are the projections going to look like next week?
Mhm.
When you know that these people who are putting together the projections, they're talking to coaches, they're talking to front office people, they're getting feedback based, and then their projections are based on that feedback that they get.
Mhm.
If we see Billy Richmond jump up like 10 to 15 spots in draft projections, maybe like this time next week,
Mhm.
I think that's a pretty good indication they like him.
Mhm.
And that might be, pretty hard for Arkansas to lure him back in next year if that's the case.
Yeah, and I think you're kind of already starting to see that he's a riser. When he first declared for the draft, I really wasn't seeing him on all that many mock drafts, just kind of in general. And now he's already, like I said earlier, kind of in the 30s. As things kind of stand. And yesterday he had a really good day yesterday. And you don't want to read too much into it because it's such a small sample size. But he killed it in the athleticism kind of tests. He had a 2.82 shuttle run, and then he tied with Darius Acuff on the 3/4 court sprint, 3.06 seconds for the best in the class. So you already know that he's going to have all of these great athleticism scorings, and then he had a pretty decent day shooting as well.
You
He
said
was
he was
yeah
sixth in 3-point shooting.
yeah
Is this guarded or is this unguarded 3-point
it's
shooting?
it's
Okay.
unguarded. I mean,
All
this
right.
is just straight shooting drills. But I think the thing that people look at with that, obviously it's a very very small sample size, so you don't want to read too much into it, like I said. But with Billy Richmond, the big, I guess, concern with him as a prospect is his shooting, and the thing that you see from his results yesterday was that that is workable if not serviceable to this point. And he's, like we've talked about him, he's already got all of the the defensive things that you want. He's already an NBA level athlete. The shooting is kind of where his biggest concerns are as a prospect. And yesterday he kind of showed that it's certainly workable for him. And yeah, how that kind of comes into fruition. Today, I think today and tomorrow are the scrimmages, so that's going to be big moments for him because he's going to play in those scrimmages and kind of go through that. And I'm sure that they're going to want to see him shoot against prospects kind of in a similar range as kind of he is viewed. So, yeah, like you said, I think that he's kind of the more likely guy to come back because the shooting, you want to see it, improve like it did last year from his freshman year. You want to see it continue to improve at a higher clip, through all of that. So I think that's kind of where Billy Richmond stands. But just kind of overall, yesterday, I thought he was one of the biggest standouts, kind of based on, kind of what you, I guess, thought about him kind of entering the day, entering the combine week and everything like that. And there's a couple of other guys, Kingston Flemings, I thought had a really great day yesterday. Toby Olala, I can't talk. He had a good day as well. But, that's, just kind of, I guess, where he stands at the moment.
Richmond has the ticker. Is it Bill Raftery who calls it the ticker?
Yep,
I think
so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the thing that just like you can talk about the measurables, you can talk about how they shoot, you can talk about how they test, how fast they can run and jump and all this stuff. Like it's his motor, and I mean, and I guess maybe for lack of a better word, just his heart that he plays with, the hustle that he plays with is just like I think that is you can go out. You take the money ball theory and you apply it to basketball. You can maybe go out and, replicate Darius Acuff's assist numbers. I don't know if you can, but I'm just, speaking hypothetically here.
Yeah.
Maybe you can come close to, getting Meleek Thomas's 3-point production. But it's that hustle and that effort that Richmond plays with that it's been a long time since you've seen anybody like that come through and wear a Razorback uniform. And that's the one element, like the characteristic about him that I just think is irreplaceable next year if they can't get him back. But on the flip side, if they can get him back, I mean, that is a trait that can really help take that team a long way.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, like we keep saying, you can see all of these different qualities that he already has with regard to his athleticism and, his defense is, he was an all-SEC defensive team member this year. So, and I think that's something that obviously, NBA teams are really, I think, kind of starting to hone in a lot more on in this class and kind of in the ensuing classes is the defense, because the offense in the NBA just continues to get better and better. So you really want to hone in on, really great defensive players like a Billy Richmond. So, is that something that kind of boosts him even closer to that first round, which is kind of, I guess, where I guess the cutoff is for return versus not return for some guys. And obviously there's, different cutoffs for different guys. I mean, Tommy Houck would have been borderline lottery and he's back at Florida. So, everybody's different. I don't even remember how I got on that tangent, but, I think that you see all of that and how it's kind of, I guess, kind of playing out, and you see how hard he plays on both ends of the floor. And, that's something that, obviously, GMs, scouts, they're obviously going to like that. And I think that's something that, I think we've kind of seen covering Arkansas. It's something that endears people to, a specific player, a specific team.
Do you think he'll play that hard in the NBA?
Yeah.
Can you play that hard in the NBA? Because you can put your body on the line. I think there's a lot of people who worry about what what he's going to do. Diving over
maybe
a bench
you
or
tone it back
hopping
a
over
bit,
the cheerleaders or whatever the case might be. But when you're playing so many more NBA games than you're playing in college, and let's be honest, like NBA regular season games, they just don't mean as much as college regular season games do. Especially the big marquee games.
For yesteryear.
What's that?
For yesteryear. Expanded tournament.
Oh well, we'll get to that here in just a minute. But they don't mean as much as they do in college. Like your conference games, or if you're Arkansas and you're playing Duke in Chicago, or you're playing Louisville at Bud Walton Arena, or playing at Miami like they did in the ACC Challenge a couple of years ago. Like you just don't see that in the NBA. I don't know. I just don't feel like you see the same effort, desire in pro basketball like you see in college basketball.
Yeah, I mean, and some of that is like you don't want to, injure yourself for an extended period of time or anything like that. But you've got guys who are like that. Dellavedova, those years ago, it's the first one who comes to mind. That guy was flying everywhere. But I do think that's replicable. Maybe not to the a million miles an hour every moment of every game, but just because there is so many more games and there's so much more, turnaround, a lot of back-to-backs and everything like that. So sometimes that does kind of come into play. Like, hey, maybe slow it down for this game versus that game. Sometimes that's just kind of stuff that happens, and other times, I do think that there are moments in the NBA regular season when sometimes these guys are just incredibly difficult to guard, right? I mean, these are the best 400 plus basketball players on the planet, and I think you see that a lot. And you give them the space, they're going to hit a shot. You give them space, they're going to hit you a shot. If you get too close, they're going to drive past you. So sometimes I think that kind of overshadows just how good of defenders some of these guys are in the NBA, just because these are also just incredible guys with the ball in their hands as well. But yeah, another tangent that I just kind of got off on, but yeah.
Darius Acuff, I know that you said he's mentioned as like a top 10 pick. How high do you think you can go?
I think there's a world in which he gets up to number 4. I don't think that's likely.
Behind.
I think right now it's looking like it's going to be AJ Dybantsa at number 1, going to Washington, and then Darren Peterson number 2 going to Utah.
Do they have creatine at Utah?
I'd imagine they've got something there, yeah. But
isn't that been crazy?
Yeah, that's
like that, I mean, like you talk about the stories that just totally derail a combine, and this
the creatine.
Like high, I think I've got it here. He blamed his erratic playing time at KU on taking high doses of creatine that led to debilitating cramping. Okay.
Which creatine can make you cramp, I think.
Was he like drinking coffee with it? They say whenever you take it, and I've never taken creatine, but like they say when you take it, I think you're supposed to drink like insane amounts of water with it. Maybe they need to drink some more water.
Yeah, but
go ahead. So you think?
Yeah, so I
Dybantsa,
Peterson, 1, 2 in some order. Looks like Dybantsa is going to be the guy who goes number 1.
Who's got the first pick this year?
Washington Wizards. So yeah, I think that's kind of where that kind of stands. I'm sure Utah's got the number 2 pick. I'm sure they would have loved to have gotten AJ, back in Utah. I'm sure everybody would have, liked that because I mean he played prep school there and then went to BYU obviously, and yeah, all of that. But then you've got Cam Boozer looking at probably that number 3. Number 4 is probably going to be Caleb Wilson at North Carolina. That kind of looks like your top 4, and then after that, it's kind of a who's who of who's going to go next. It's Darius Acuff, is it Keaton Wagler, is it Kingston Flemings, guys like that. Yeah. So it's kind of in that range. I think there's a world in which he could go at number 4 to Chicago, but I don't think that's likely just because Caleb Wilson is such a premier athlete. The shot is a little bit of concern with him, but he's such a good defender and he's really good at getting to the rim and all of that I think that he's kind of a tap in for Chicago there at number 4, assuming that the Grizzlies don't take him at number 3, and also assuming that Dybantsa and Peterson go 1, 2 in some order. So yeah, those are kind of the consensus top 4 as things kind of stand by the looks of it. So I think that you could see Darius Acuff go from 5 to 10, probably somewhere in that 5 to 8 range, probably more likely in my eyes.
And I looked this up here. The first round draft order, the top 10 picks. You've got Washington number 1, Utah 2, Memphis 3, Chicago 4, the Clippers are 5, Brooklyn is 6, Sacramento 7, Atlanta is 8, Dallas is 9, and Milwaukee is 10. And by the way, I had to go to a second website because there were a couple of logos I didn't recognize what they were. They didn't have the name next to them, so I had to go to the NCAA website here where they actually have the teams spelled out for me.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the Clippers kind of need guards, so I could see him going in that range.
They need a new logo too. That's one of the ones I didn't recognize.
That is a new logo.
Yeah, that way over my head. I think I got the other ones. Yeah, Washington. That's a different one than I remember, but there you go. Hey, moving on and talking about a couple of other Razorback basketball items. So they got a commitment. I'm not even going to try to butcher his name.
Mika Murinen.
There you go. I almost said Micah. So Mika Murinen. This is international player who they got a commitment from
Finland.
Finland.
He's from Finland. Played last year at Partizan Belgrade. Played at Sunrise Christian,
Yeah,
I
was
think
gonna
it
say
is
he's
in
played
Wichita.
a couple of prep schools
Yeah.
in the U.S. Right.
hmm So that's kind of.
What are
guess
your
his
takes on
backstory.
him, or what is your take on him and how he fits into the overall picture of what they have next season?
Yeah, I mean he's everything you want as an athlete, right? I mean he's kind of, top whatever percent athlete that you can have. I mean he's a guy who can fly at the rim. He's a guy who can get blocks. Maybe want to add a little bit of muscle, just as pretty much any freshman, right? So that's kind of I guess the main things that you look at. He's a guy who can shoot. One of the clips that you see going around with him whenever you watch his highlight clips is he hits a 3 over Nikola Jokic at the Euros. So that's kind of, if I hit a 3 over Nikola Jokic, I would, even though Nikola Jokic isn't a great defender, I would be posting that everywhere. But yeah, I think those are the things that immediately stand out. I think that there's some growth to be had on the defensive end, and he didn't have, the year that he would have wanted playing for Partizan Belgrade. There was a coaching change, and, your coach resigned, and, obviously, he didn't play a ton, and, there was that, and, obviously there's going to be, when you're playing for, a club like Partizan, which is one of the best clubs in Europe, there's going to be a lot of growth that needs to happen, and, he's talked about how he feels that he matured in that process and stuff like that. And, that was one of the things that you heard, about him just kind of in, prep school. And that was that he kind of needs to grow from a maturity standpoint, along with, some of the things in basketball as well. So, you think that, maybe that has helped him, even though, he didn't have the year that he would have wanted. And, yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the surface level, Mika Murinen. I'm learning Finnish
I was
on
going to say that.
Duolingo.
Now, I'm glad you said this because I
So-
wanted to point this out. You're trying to learn Finnish,
Yeah.
so you can speak to him. Didn't he do it?
Yeah.
What he kind of honoring an interview here
Yeah, so
recently?
there was an interview that he was doing that he was being asked the questions in English, but he was answering in Finnish.
Even though he
you know,
could
he could understand
the
it. He
English
was
questions.
asked to answer in English, but he was answering in Finnish. So I'm preparing.
You have all your bases covered.
Yeah, I Mina olen Anthony. I'm Anthony. Sina olet Matt. You are Matt.
I am.
So
Yes.
I can say some other things. Sina olet Velho. You're a wizard.
Oh, okay. All right.
You know,
you
so,
won't be saying that to Darius Acuff, right?
Yeah, so I would be pretty surprised if he ended up
Yeah.
Velho, but
it's funny that you're doing that and you're using what's the
Duolingo.
Duolingo. Okay.
So yeah, I've got my bag's all the way over there. I bought a little spiral notebook that I'm taking my Finnish notes in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm determined. I'm gonna learn Finnish. It's kind of hard. I mean, it's already a difficult language to learn for a native English speaker to begin with, because there's like hardly anything in common between the two languages. Like, there's only been like one cognate that I've learned so far, and it's pony, because that means pony. So it's a hard language to learn.
Have you ever learned another language?
I can speak a little bit of German and a little bit of Spanish.
Okay.
Nothing like, I'm not fluent by any means,
no.
but I can speak tiny
I
little bits
took
of both.
probably 4 years of Spanish.
Mhm.
I don't think I could speak a lick of it. I just and
Yo
my
quiero
problem-
con leche con. Oh wait, no.
you say something about milk.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yo quiero un café con leche y acusar, por favor.
Yeah, I caught about 2 words there.
I asked for a coffee with milk and sugar, please.
Yeah. I was never real great at Spanish because I would always go like a year between. I would always try to take, when I was in college, I would try to take my Spanish courses in the summer, because that was when I felt like they were easiest, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. You could spend more time focusing on that course, but the problem is that you would go a year between, or I would go a year between reading or speaking or thinking about Spanish, and if you're not constantly brushing up on this,
you
you're
lose
forgetting
it quick. Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Which
kept
is-
forgetting it, and that's why
Which is
I
one of
kept
my
making,
concerns with Finnish, because where am I gonna be consuming Finnish?
You need to go have weekly interviews with Mika.
Well, I mean that's not until maybe summer or fall.
Speaking of him,
So
there's going to be, and I think there's going to be some natural comparisons made to Big Z, Zvonimir Ivicic. Are they fair?
I don't think that they're
not
very similar players.
Okay.
I mean, Zvonimir Ivicic, he was more of a 5. I think Miranin is probably more of a 4.
But they would bring Big Z out on the perimeter and play him out there.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think Miranin's probably more athletic. Not probably. I think he's definitely more athletic. I think he's certainly bouncier. I think he can stretch the floor a little bit better. I think he's not going to be the rim protector Zvonimir Ivicic is, at least not immediately. I don't think. I very well could be wrong in that assertion, but I think that I don't think that they're very similar players. I think there's some similarities, that they're big guys who can stretch the floor a little bit. Yeah. So, and they're both obviously European.
Right.
So there are those, but I think that they are different players. I think I think that Miranin's distribution's a little bit better than Ivicic's, and it's stuff like that. But yeah, I don't view them as super similar players.
So in terms of the circle of trust that Calipari is going to have next year, you've got Miranin, you've got the 3 American high school 5-star players who they've signed, which are Jordan Smith, J.J. Andrews, and Abdou Toure. Then you've got the 2 transfers from Georgia and from Furman. You're waiting to see what happens with Richmond. You're waiting to see what happens with Meleek Thomas. How do you foresee roster building going forward if they get one or none of those players or neither of those players back?
Yeah, I think that the thing that it immediately cries out for I guess attention just with the roster they've got on paper is another 5. Cooper Bowser, he's tall, he's athletic, but he's not big, at least not right now. He's a little slender.
This is the Furman transfer.
Yes, yeah. There's a difference between height and size, and I think Arkansas right now doesn't have a ton of size. Especially if Malik Ewan is not going to come back, which I don't imagine he is.
I don't think he is either.
So there's that. They don't have a lot of size. They've got height, but they don't have a lot of size. You've got height in Bowser, in Miranin, and some of the other guys they've brought in, but they don't have a ton of girth, I guess. I hate that word, but I think that's the big thing that you're immediately looking at. So you want to, I don't know if you want to go overseas and grab some guys from there. If Billy Richmond doesn't return and he stays in the draft, what are the options there? Do you go after a Milan Momcilovic, an Iowa State transfer who's going through the draft process right now? I think the interesting one is, if Meleek Thomas doesn't come back, do you look for another guard who's maybe testing the draft waters, who's coming back to school and is in the portal? Is that an option? I'm not so sure. I think that's a big reason why Jeremiah Wilkinson, the Georgia transfer, is such a big get for them, because he's a guy who can play both, as a starter and off the bench, which he did a lot for Georgia last year. He's the ACC Sixth Man of the Year his freshman year at Cal. So I think that, I think that the bigger concern with regard to, if you lose both of those guys, I think the bigger concern is replacing Billy Richmond as opposed to replacing Meleek Thomas, which obviously Meleek Thomas, plus defender in my eyes, obviously a great shooter.
A lot better as the season went on.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously a great shooter, plus defender, a guy who can play with the ball in his hands as a distributor, but you've got guys in the backcourt who are already kind of going to be, I guess, those you can fill in those. I mean, Jordan Smith, I'm super high on him. As a freshman, Jeremiah Wilkinson coming in. I think Billy Richmond, if he were to stay in the draft, I think that's a more difficult guy to replace, because you're either going to have to rely on trying to get in, a transfer or an overseas player, or you're going to be relying probably more heavily than you thought you would be on J.J. Andrews and Abdou Toure, which, both of those guys, very good players in their own right, but how much are they going to be ready to shoulder that big of a load that Billy Richmond had this year immediately? I think that's the kind of the big question. So
Can't
I think
replace Billy Richmond. Just can't.
Yeah.
Can't do it. He is one of one in my eyes. I think that he'd be very difficult to replace just because of all those intangibles that we talked about earlier. Arkansas still has not announced who they're going to hire or how they're going to and this is a possibility too, how they're going to reshuffle the staff or restructure the staff to replace Chuck Martin. I will say, the one thing that I've noticed about Calipari is that it feels like there's never a real rush to get stuff announced. So there may be something planned, but it hasn't been announced yet. But that's been well over a month now since he departed for North Carolina.
Yeah. So I mean, that'll be, I guess, an interesting offseason story to continue following. Is who kind of comes in? Do they go and get a former?
Do they promote somebody from within?
Do they promote somebody
staff?
from within?
You know,
Is it Brad Calipari, Tyler Eulis, guys like that? Do you go and get a former GA that you have had in the past, or do you go and get?
Do you elevate someone who right now is on your support staff into an assistant coaching role, whether it be a Bruiser Flint or a Ronnie Brewer, somebody like that?
Guys with coaching experience.
There's a lot of ways they can go with this.
Yeah,
and of course you talk about Calipari and 40 years almost of coaching between college and the NBA. I mean,
he's got a lot of connections.
The Rolodex. Can we still use the term Rolodex in 2026? The Rolodex is full of names and contacts.
Yeah. So I mean, do you go and try to get Orlando Antigua out of Illinois, or do you go and try to get whoever fill in the blank? Tony Barbie from Murray State. Whoever you would want to, I guess, throw out. Who has worked with John Calipari in the past. So
Chuck Martin was pulling a nice salary. So I mean, it's the resources I would think are there if they want to go out and really make a splash for this hire.
Yeah, and I mean, coaches, assistant coaches, you see movement kind of with assistant coaches kind of throughout the off season. Obviously, probably more so kind of right as the season ends, as opposed to kind of in the middle of summer. But it does happen. So there's. Guys will move, so I'm not sure exactly where that's going to go. Is it going to be an internal promotion? Is it going to be external? I think that's going to be something that's going to be very interesting.
I think it will. The way I've noticed they do basketball is that it will be a flood of news releases whenever it happens. Like everything just comes in like this tidal wave of, oh, by the way, we've signed 2 people, and we've signed a new assistant coach, and we're going.
And here's the entire support staff.
Yeah, it's here's our summer scrimmaging plans, and here's the first 2 games we're playing of the season. I may be embellishing that a little bit, but that seems like it comes pretty fast like that. I know you don't like the 76-team NCAA tournament. I don't care.
I hate it.
Like it doesn't matter to me because I never liked the 68-team tournament.
I didn't either. They never should have expanded from 64. But
the first 4 concept, what's it going to be now?
It's going to be the opening round. I think it's
6?
12 games. Or something
games.
Like that.
So, I think isn't it? Is it 6
It's officially
games?
It's officially going to be known as the first round or the opening round. Excuse me. I believe it's.
So is there going to be an opening round and a first round?
I think so.
Well, that's
which
confusing.
is stupid. Yeah, it's dumb. There's nothing here that's good. So
I think
not only
didn't I hear right? Isn't it going to be 2 days of triple headers in Dayton?
I believe so.
So it's 12
It's going to be
teams.
in 2 different sites now. So it's not just
so
going
it's
to be
not
in
just
Dayton, which stinks. I think one of the big things, the big reasons people came around to the first 4, which not that a ton of people did,
I
because
never
the
came
first
around to
4.
it. How long has the first 4 been in place? It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah, I don't.
Because I remember
exactly
Shaka
how many
Smart
years.
at VCU. That would have been
2011
is the year I have in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
I don't
accurate.
know if that's exactly right, but
so I mean, it's been a lot of years since the first 4 concept has been there. I could not I really don't think I can tell you that I've watched one full first 4 game, and probably haven't watched more than bits and pieces of 3 or 4 of these. It's just not.
And that's not an abnormal
anything,
thing. Yeah,
but it's never been anything that's registered with me. And I'm not like the basketball diehard. I'm not like you who's watching Gonzaga and name a random team on a Tuesday night
Portland.
at 1 a.m. There you go.
Portland won that game. I was watching.
I know that you're tuned into that stuff. Like that's not me. But I do, I mean, I'm like everybody else. I love the Thursday Friday concept of the NCAA tournament. I just have never been able. So all of this is a long-winded way to say I never liked the 68 deal, so I'm not really anti-76. The one thing I wish they would do, and there's 2 or 3 changes I wish they'd make to the tournament.
Go back to 64.
Well, but beyond that, if you're going to have 76 teams or 68 teams, if you're going to have play-in games, actually make it bubble teams that play the play-in games. Stop sending the 16 seeds, the teams that win the SWAC and the MEAC and some of these other conferences. Quit sending them to that first 4 site. Let them go have an actual NCAA tournament experience on a Thursday or a Friday at one of the big sites, and make these play-in games actual bubble teams. And also, I wish they would do one other thing. I wish they would quit giving these bubble teams the 11 seed. Like actually, bump them down and make them play somebody really difficult whenever they get to Thursday or Friday.
Like Georgia did whenever they were a 14 seed, the random.
Were they a 14?
Yeah, they were a 14. The lowest rated power conference team.
Was that in 08?
I don't remember when it was.
Well, because in 08, they would not have made the NCAA
tournament.
without
winning it. Yeah.
Had they not beaten Arkansas at the SEC tournament that year that the tornado hit the Georgia Dome. That was the first time I ever covered the SEC tournament, by the way. First day that I ever covered the SEC tournament, I about got wiped out by a tornado. True story.
But I mean, I don't disagree with anything said there. I think the main thing that you see, and Ryan Odom talked about basically having the exact same thing, not minding that the tournament expanded. But
this is Virginia's coach.
Yes, yeah, the UMBC coach who beat Virginia as a 16. He's much the same, that he would like to see the auto qualifiers get into the field right away. He is on record saying that he doesn't mind the expansion, but he would wish that it would be that way.
Well, if you really want to make the NCAA tournament better, quit giving your auto qualifier to the team that wins your conference tournament. Actually give it to the best team, because there's too many times where the best teams don't get to go play in the NCAA tournament because they've been really good for 10 weeks or 12 weeks or however long the conference season lasts, and they have one bad weekend, and hey, you won 29 games, but you're not going to get to go to the NCAA tournament because you're going to be a one-bid league.
Yeah, you saw that a couple of times this year. I mean, Yale lost to Penn in the Ivy Championship. Belmont got knocked out in the Missouri Valley. those are teams that could have won games.
And there were people wondering if that was going to happen to Miami of Ohio, and they only lost
one game,
time.
one game before the NCAA tournament, which is I've got all my opinions on that, which we've discussed on the show and everything else. But yeah, you got. The big thing with the auto qualifiers playing in the opening round now, sick to my stomach, is that they get full win shares and units for those games. So it's not like they get a partial for anything. They get full, a full payment if they win that game.
Which matters
to them, the school, and the conferences.
That's pretty much all that matters to.
Yeah, so that's real money that's going to those institutions. So that's why you're seeing.
But in most cases, those units that they get, everybody gives that back to the conference, and then it's dispersed. And not everybody's got this, but like in the SEC's case, it goes back to the conference. The conference gets a cut, and then everybody else gets a cut.
Yeah,
an equal cut. Doesn't matter if you didn't make the NCAA tournament. You're making as much because Florida goes on a run and wins the national championship as everybody else did.
Yeah.
Some conferences are not that way, but I think I suspect most of them are.
Yeah. So that's why you see some of these schools and conferences in particular that are fine with sending their auto qualifier to those games, because I think the SWAC has had its representative win in the first four. I think 3 of the past 5 years or something like that.
And they're probably not going to win in the first round.
Probably not.
The second first round.
So goodness. That's real money that's going to the SWAC. And that's why you see a lot of these conferences kind of in favor of the way it is. Even though I think, the vast majority of, fans and, pundits and alike would like to see, the teams that win those automatic bids get into the proper field, the actual field, as I'm going to now refer to it for the rest of my life. So yeah, I mean that's kind of where it stands at the moment.
I think if you're a fan of a team that's in a power conference, you ought to like the 76 because those are going to be the teams that are going to be the most like those are going to be the ones I think that benefit the most from this move because
oh yeah, the power conferences are
so like if you're Arkansas,
they're kicking their
if
laying
you're
down.
let's just say if you're Arkansas and say you have a disappointing season and you go 17-14,
oh, you're not missing.
you're probably not missing.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. That's not a good year.
But but you don't care. I don't think if you're a fan, you're like, nah, man. I know that we're in the NCAA tournament, but I don't feel like we really deserve it because we're number 73 this year.
Yeah, I don't know because like I don't know like let's
It
say
doesn't
like
matter
Indiana this year like they
I
wanted
don't think
this
it
season to be
matters
over.
whether it's NFL, Major League Baseball. Talking about taking the college football playoff to 24 teams, it doesn't matter. Like as long as it's within the rules. People, if you can qualify for it, they're going to be excited about being in the postseason.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think that if you're a fan of a power conference school, why would you be against this? Because it's probably going to benefit you down the road at some point in time.
Yeah, which is, gross. But yeah,
you don't have to like it as a basketball purist, but I think that.
But I mean, on the flip side, I think well, first off, the coaches like the NABC was just not included in the conversations which I think is just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But second off, like, a lot of coaches, you would expect, greater access to the field, greater access to job security. I kind of view it the opposite. Like, if you miss the tournament in a 76-team field, like, see ya, buddy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In a lot of cases,
because
obviously.
you see teams that make some of those decisions now based on.
You see, Texas fired Rodney Terry despite making the NCAA tournament.
North Carolina fired
Hubert Davis this year despite being in the NCAA tournament. So you
they
see
blew
that
a
sometimes
19-point
anyway.
lead.
Well, that too, yeah. But yeah. So I mean, if you miss a 76-team field and you're a power conference coach, I mean, barring obviously there are circumstances that happen for one reason or another, a bunch of injuries, etc. Get ready to go back to coaching mid-major basketball, buddy. But yeah, and like the thing that bothers me the most is that like the access has been the big argument because of the expansion of NCAA Division I as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's expanded by however many schools since the field was originally expanded to 64, I think in 1984 or whenever it was. But the access argument with that entailed or with that in mind of all these schools that have been added to Division I falls flat on its face when you realize that only one of those schools has ever gotten an at-large bid, and it was UCF, and UCF is now in the Big 12. So the idea that this benefits Lindenwood or Southern Indiana or Queens or whoever is it's BS.
Yeah. It benefits the people who make the money and make the rules.
That it does.
And it could benefit Arkansas one day. So I think that if you're a Razorback fan, you probably ought to like this 76-team NCAA tournament. You can read Anthony's work at our website, wholehogsports.com. He's covering the draft combine
right now.
Right
we got,
now.
We got a scrimmage going right now.
It right now. Is that Dan Hurley?
No, it is not.
Okay. Well, it kind of looked like him for a second. I just saw a bald guy in glasses. So you can read his coverage there. Of course, Razorback baseball at Kentucky this week. We've got plenty of baseball stories on our site. And one of them is that I interviewed DJ Baxendale this week. I've got a story there of him talking about this new role as Arkansas's baseball general manager. Tom Murphy was out last night, talked to Ryan Silverfield on the first night of his football roadshow. You can read that at our website. Lots of stories at wholehogsports.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Bubba Carpenter will be here in studio. We'll preview this Arkansas-Kentucky regular season